Director for Sustainable Development and Regional Planning Division at the Program Institute of Jamaica. Ladies and gentlemen, we have again a number of students. This is the second presentation that we do together, and where really a big chunk of the public is from our students. So you're welcome. Please, I'm sure you will have a special word to them. This is the launch of the public awareness campaign of this program. This program is not didn't start yesterday. It's a little bit more than 1 year old, but there are different components that start at different time and that needs to be prepared before being launched. So that's why this is a little bit later than the rest of the program. There was some work that was done before, obviously, to get to that point. Now, just to go back to the concept of climate change, how is climate change affecting Jamaica? We'll talk about climate change. Is it something that we should worry about, we should bother about, or is it something that we're not quite sure is happening and how it's affecting us? Now, when we're talking about just the Caribbean islands, there are about 40 million people, and there's an increased vulnerability to climate change. High temperatures, rising sea levels, and increased hurricane intensity is threatening lives, property, and livelihoods in this region. Not only this region, but this region is particularly sensitive to these things. Now, again, should we do something about it or just let it be? But if no action is taken to try to prevent or to protect infrastructure, people, goods and services, the increased hurricane damage, loss in tourism revenue, infrastructure damages, there's a projection that up to $22 billion annually could be lost by 2050. And then I've got another figure, 46 billion by 2100, but I don't know if we can go as far as that. But anyway, the idea is that there are a lot of things that could go wrong. It's going to cost a lot of money to repair things that have been destroyed by climate change. So it's something that we should prepare, we should take those things into account and not just let it go. Jamaica is not an exemption. The economy of Jamaica is dependent on the country's natural environment, and in particular on the coastal and marine resources. You're part of a group that is called the Small Island Developing States, and all these islands are quite sensitive to all those issues. Now, the preliminary research, it's not clear, but it says that it's likely that there will be an increase in extreme weather events such as floods, rains, drought, increasing density of hurricanes, and then it might affect the coastal area by having saline intrusions, pressure from the growing population, the consequence rising demand for groundwater, and that will further reduce the availability of fresh water supply for domestic and industrial purposes. So you've got a whole lot of things that are interlinked. If something is attacked, is affected by climate change, the population will be affected also in the end. One of the components of this program is watershed management to allow penetration of water in the groundwater, so there is more availability. If that is not done, the water will go straight in the rivers and straight back into the sea, and a lot of it will be lost for the country. Just to remember, I mean, between 2004 and 2008, you had 5 major storms event which caused tremendous damage in this country. The estimates are up to $1.2 billion, which can be partly attributed to climate change. Actually, to a certain point, we're still wondering, is it just a freak event, 5 years nearly with the tropical storms, and it does happen? Or is this going to be repeated more and more often? That's where the problem is. It's not that something very special is going to happen, that suddenly a storm that you've never seen, or the intensity is going to happen. No, it's that the recurrence of these storms are going to be, they're going to be more frequent, and that's where the problem will be. So the government identified a number of priorities for this program, which was to try to develop responses for the management, watershed management, forest resources management, water sector adaptation, and the climate change awareness building. This is this component here that we have. Now, this is not on its own. This project doesn't exist on its own, because in 2007 the European Union, the Commission and the Union decided to start working much more with lot of countries and to build a global, what is called the Global Climate Change Alliance between the European Union and the most vulnerable countries to climate change. The least developed countries and the small island developing states are some of the main targets of these first activities, because the assumption is that these are countries that are vulnerable to the impact of climate change, most vulnerable, and that it most help to actually respond to these threats. So the two main objectives of the Global Climate Change Alliance are deepening the policy dialogue between the EU and the developing countries on this issue of climate change, and increasing the support to those countries to be able to adapt and respond to those issues. And Jamaica was one of the 18 countries selected for this first Global Climate Change Alliance project. Now, the project itself is working more on improving the adaptive capacity in selected terrestrial and coastal systems. So adaptive capacity, that's the concept. You try to analyze the problematic and you try to design responses to these issues, so that later on, when these issues are repeated, there is a more prepared system to respond and try to counter the issues, the problem that were brought by the climate change. And then part of that is the institutional strengthening, obviously, and the awareness building. It's a fairly strong, big budget. It's about 4 million euros. It's going to 4 million euros. It's about 400 million Jamaican dollars, I think, over a period of 30 months. So it's a first step. It's a first program. It might be. It will probably be followed by other programs or investment, but this is the first one. So therefore, it is a very important one, because that's what also will put Jamaica in the forefront of the countries doing something about climate change, and then being susceptible to get more funding on those issues. But it's not only capacity building that we're working on. I mean, there are some effective activities that are going on the ground also, not just capacity building, thinking behind the desk. What should we do if? No. There are some activities that are being implemented right now. It has started a while ago. Rehabilitation of watershed through slope stabilization measures, such as reforestation of denuded hillsides. That's one of the activities that is started quite strongly. Mechanisms established to improve management of coastal ecosystems, increased resilience of selected coastal areas against potential climate change impact, re-establishment of seagrass beds, mangrove forests, and alternative livelihood system will be promoted. So a number of these activities have already been launched. The tests are taking place right now, measures are taking place right now, so all of these things are happening. And then there is the capacity building and awareness raising through the launch of the climate change awareness campaign, this part here. So the climate change causes change in rainfall pattern, drought, flood, and everything. So it increased the intensity of storm more than anything else. And so you need to have responses necessary to implement, such as change the supply and demand side for water resources. So this is going to happen, so you will have to respond to that. Diversification and selection of new plants varieties to stabilize crop productivity, food security. This is some of the activities that we're thinking of. Different thoughts can also be brought in the design and location of infrastructure, not so close to the seacoast, or in more protected areas. All of that will impact on later rehabilitation, obviously. This is the problems, the storms, the tropical storms are going to happen, but if you protect some infrastructure or put them in better place, you might not have to rehabilitate them in the end. So that's something that can be done also. But in the end, what would be the cost? Because it's all about money also. We're talking about cost to the industry, cost to the country, but what would be the cost if nothing is done to try to respond to those climate change issues? And the estimates, it's a general figure, but the adaptation could be as high as 1% of the GDP. That's the cost to respond, to try to adapt to the climate change. But if nothing is done in prevention and adaptation, the cost of recovery could be as high as 5%. So it's a 1 to 5. So there is an interest, and there is an interest, there is a need, but there is also a financial incentive, I would say, to do something and to respond to these issues. So this is what we're talking about, climate change, a project that is being launched with the government and UNEP. We are talking here about designing responses, and in this case, a lot of other people will talk about this specific concept of the awareness campaign, but once you design response, once you analyze the problem, you need this to be made known and distribute. The information must be distributed so that everyone can take that into account. And this is a very important part, this is an essential part, because otherwise everyone works in the corner and there is no information going around, no one is really getting the problem, and it's not going to be very efficient in the end. So there needs to be a fairly wide information of these issues and the proposed solutions. That's it. Thank you very much.